Let's go ahead and start with the word of prayer. Lord God, we just thank you for the opportunity to be here and study your holy word. Thank you, God, for your word. And Lord, just speak to us today through your word. It's so beautiful, it's so lovely, and I just can't wait to get to it. And we just ask you to teach us something that will help us in our daily lives. And we ask in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Amen. All right, Esther chapter 2, 3, and 4. We're going to get through these chapters today pretty quickly. And the book of Esther, to me, is amazing. It's like Shakespeare almost. When you go through this book, the way that everything just comes together and the whole, this guy does this guy wrong, but then it comes back on his head. It's like something that Shakespeare would have written, it seems like. This is just such a fascinating book. And last week I told you a little bit about the story, but I didn't tell you the names and what the names mean. So just so we remember, last week was all about Vashti, and Vashti was the bad queen, and Esther is going to be the good queen. And Vashti was a type of the church, and the church is not good right now, if you will. And the rapture comes to take her out because it's a type of what? Apostasy, Laodicea, all that stuff. So what we have is now we're introduced to Esther. So last time we were introduced to this kingdom, and the kingdom is in Shushan. Shushan means lily, okay? Lily. I don't know why. Maybe there's a lot of lilies there. Esther means star or hidden. I find that interesting because hidden. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah, and Hadassah means myrtle. You know what a myrtle tree is? How many of you have seen a crepe myrtle here in Pensacola? You can't kill that plant. The more you trim it, the more it comes back. And it's a type of Israel. And what we're going to see here, this book is about an attempted genocide on the people of Israel. The Bible says, blessed are them that bless them and cursed are them that curse them. Well, they tried it here and it didn't work out too well for them. The guy that tried to kill Israel, it went back on his head and he was hanged on the very gallows that he built to try to kill them. This book is more than just history. This book is prophecy because something interesting happens in the 1940s with a guy named Hitler. And what did he try to do? He tried to genocide Israel. It didn't work out too well for him. There's a state of Israel now. He didn't wipe them out, did he? Yet he tried to get rid of all of them. So it happened. It happened again. And as we looked at, it's going to happen again in the tribulation. After the rapture and that 7-year tribulation, the Antichrist is going to try to get rid of the Jews. And we've already studied the book of Revelation. What happens? They flee into the wilderness for 1,260 days where they're protected by God. So it's a fascinating thing. When you're reading the Bible, there's a double, sometimes triple application of Scripture. Isn't that amazing? So this is pretty cool that we see this, and I can't wait as we get farther along. We're going to see that what happened in World War II to those people that killed the Jews is almost exactly what happened to Haman. To the very number. There was 10 of them that were hanged with them. Over here there were 10 that were hanged. And it's wow. Don't mess with a Jew. Amen? Yes, they're stiff-necked and uncircumcised of heart, like Jesus says. They reject the Messiah right now. But God did choose that race. And he made promises to Abraham. And God doesn't make promises that he doesn't keep. So if someone's a Jew, pray for the Jews. I've had people ask me today, what does it mean to pray for the peace of Jerusalem? I got a phone call this week. And he says, what does that mean? I said, well, to me, when does Jerusalem get peace? When Jesus comes back and rules. So I'm basically praying, please come back soon, Lord. The sooner you come back, the sooner there'll be peace for 1,000 years. So in that way, but we're also praying for God to bless them so that they'll come to their Messiah and believe that Jesus is their Messiah. So we looked at this last week. We found a lot of things. Ahasuerus, I forgot to tell you, means prince, head, or chief. And that's what he was. He was the chief. And Vashti means beautiful. Okay? And we saw Hegi or Haggai means separation, meditation, word, or groaning. It's very fun to go through and study the Bible, and there's different ways to study the Bible. And one of the fun ways to study the Bible is the name of words. What do they mean? And a lot of times, I don't think people were named what they were named on accident. I think sometimes God knew what's going to happen in the life of this person, and I don't know if he whispered in the ear of the parents and say, name them this, but it's just fascinating how their names have to do with something that takes place in their life. That just doesn't seem like that's an accident to me. And we're going to learn today about Mordecai, which means bitter oppression in Hebrew. And what has happened to the Jews for almost all of history? They've been oppressed 400 years in Egypt under the oppression there as slaves, and then oppressed here, Babylon. It also can mean in Persian, a servant of Marduk, which you know they worship. Now, what happened in the book of Daniel? Do you remember? They had their Hebrew names, but what did Nebuchadnezzar do? Say, no, I want you to have my names. So we can see how Mordecai has two different names. And so they tried to push their gods, but yet Mordecai's like, no, I got my God. You ain't changing me. So a lot of what we've already learned in Daniel will tie into this as well. So let's get started here. We're going to go to chapter 2. I'm just going to do a lot of reading of this book. And this book is amazing. And I found some things, too, that are pretty awesome. Who knows if I'll have time to mention them all while I'm thinking of it. This week I looked at a video, and twice the Bible talks about India. Remember last week when it says he was the head over of 127 provinces that went from India to Ethiopia? Well, the other time that it mentions India is in this book, and it's in the context of the king issuing a command to be written down. Do you know your Bible is printed with ink from India? I just found that fascinating that, the Bible mentions India, writing down commandment from a king. Well, we have the King James Bible written in ink from India. That's just kind of, I don't know, I find that fascinating. There's a lot of little things like that. So, Book of Esther, we learned all about Vashti. We learned all about how the prince or the king got rid of her because of her disobedience. And she was not only disobeying her husband, she was disobeying the king. So, now we start in chapter 2. And again, I get goosebumps when I think about how great this book is. It's like better than Shakespeare. There's just so much in here that's amazing. So, after these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, we're in chapter 2 of Esther, verse 1, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. So the king, I guess he started feeling sorry, or not, actually lonely. I don't think he was sorry. I think he was like, man, I don't have a queen anymore. Because he's like, man, I don't want to see her or talk to her or anything like that. Do you remember another time in the Bible when someone was like that? King David. Remember, was it Michal was his first wife? And then when he fled, King Saul gave her to somebody else. And then he said, I don't want to see her anymore. And so he didn't. So it's interesting. Always think when you're reading the Bible, there seems like there's always something else like that. And I found something this morning studying that's going to maybe give you goosebumps. Well, I'll tell it now because otherwise I'll forget. Purim. This is all about Purim. And we started this book a week after Purim. And this book is all about Purim. I don't know if that was an accident or if that was the Lord, because I wanted to start it, a week or two earlier. And Purim is all about casting lots. And we're going to see, I think today, where they cast lots on something, and that's where this name comes from, the Feast of Purim. But do you know, I was looking in the Bible, and I found 7 times that they cast lots in the Bible. Another 7. God is always using that number 7. So in Leviticus 16:8, there was the goats for a scapegoat. You had 2 goats and you cast lots to see which one was the one that was sacrificed, which one was the scapegoat. Joshua 18, verse 6 through 8, there was lots for land. They cast lots to see who gets this land or that land. 1 Samuel 14:42, Saul said, cast lots for me, and or cast lots to see who was the guy. I just got banned on TikTok. I wonder what we did. We just got banned on TikTok for what did we even say? But anyway, oh well. Saul and Jonathan, right? So this was a thing, and it fell on Jonathan. The lot did. 1 Chronicles 24. Lots for the sons of Aaron, for the priest, and they cast lots for the priest. Psalms 22:18. What is that? They cast lots over his garment. And we see that speaking of Jesus in Luke 23 and John 19. So they cast lots to see who would get his garment. Jonah, remember the book of Jonah? There was a storm and they're like, I wonder who this is. Let's cast lots. And it fell on Jonah. And then in Acts chapter 1, verse 26, they cast lots to choose the new apostle. So we think of that as like, here's the guy here, choose a straw, who gets the short straw. And we think that's just by chance. But for some reason, somehow, God can use that thing. And several times in the Bible, they choose the right one. That's really, really odd. So we're going to get into this today and look at the lots. And I didn't understand this before I studied it this week. And I still wonder if I understand how the whole lot thing, but I'll try to, there's like different theories on what it means. I'll try to get that to you. So, all right, so back to chapter 1. So the king is feeling lonely. He's like, oh, I just had a queen. Huh? And verse 2, then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, let there be fair young virgins sought for the king. And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hegi, the king's chamberlain. And his name means separation, meditation, groaning word. So separate them so that they're still virgins, right? And let their things for purification be given them. So what happens here? Well, the king gets over being mad, and here come the servants, and I mean, they're probably seeing how lonely he is, and they say, hey, why don't you have a beauty pageant? This is like the first beauty pageant, right? Well, let's do the Miss Universe or Miss Persian or whatever, I don't know. But it's talking about beauty. And remember, what does her name mean? Vashti means beautiful. Now, I don't want to not say this because this is pretty important. Sometimes we forget this. There's outward beauty and there's inward beauty. And just because someone's beautiful on the outside doesn't mean they're a good person. Sometimes the more beautiful on the outside, the more awful on the inside. So if you're, well, we're all married, I guess. But if you weren't married, don't just go for the pretty one on the outside. True beauty is on the inside. Okay? And it doesn't hurt to have it on the outside too. But true beauty is from the inside, I believe. So women from all 127 provinces. Remember chapter 1, he was over 127. So this is the first Miss Universe contest. And this guy, man, this guy's job just got a lot harder. Here he's got to take all these women from all over into his custody, and he's got to watch them and keep the boys away. I mean, this seems like this would be this would be a hard job. Verse 4, and let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen. Oh, by the way, he was a eunuch, most likely. So he wasn't attracted to the women himself. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. So let's get a new queen. And that's what happened, a new queen. And by the way, the purification, we're going to see here in a minute what that was. And it was like a whole year, and for 6 months, it was like they were bathed in perfume. So, and then Esther gets 7 women to wait on her. It's so carnal. This whole thing is just flesh, flesh, flesh. It's so weird. But God is able to take this and use this to save his people. So anyway, it's part of me likes this, part of me doesn't. It's all vanity, right? Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. That's what the king that wrote Proverbs, King Solomon says. And how many wives did he have? Okay, so anyway, let's keep going here. Verse 5, now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite. All right, Benjaminite. He's from the tribe of Benjamin. Who else is from the tribe of Benjamin in the New Testament who's pretty famous? Paul. Yeah, Jesus is from Judah. But there are people today that go around and say, when you use the word Jew, that only applies to Judah. And they say Jew comes from Judah. Well, the Bible says right here, he's a Benjaminite from the tribe of Benjamin, and he's called a Jew. So that completely gets rid of that argument. And boy, there are a lot of people that like to argue that, but that's not a truth. The truth is a Jew is anyone from the 12 tribes. But he's the son of Kish. He's a Benjaminite, okay? So that's pretty fascinating where he comes from. Now, I don't know. I should have looked this up, but Kish, doesn't that tie into Saul? Wasn't Saul from... If that's right, then he would have been royalty. And remember how Daniel was from royalty as well. So this would tie in why we're reading this morning, Laura, why he wouldn't bow down to Haman. Because he felt like, hey, I'm more royal than this guy. And I believe so. He was literally from the lineage of King Saul. All right, now verse 5 there, it mentions his name, Mordecai. And it says he's the son of, who's the son of, who's the son of. Mordecai means bitter oppression. And Jair means he enlightens or he shines. So his father's name is the guy who shines. Isn't that funny? My name is Robert, which means the illustrious one or the shining one. I looked that up one time. I'm like, wow, whatever. But okay. But that's interesting that do what you want with that. But it's kind of like Mordecai is in this kingdom full of all these people running around saying, I'm a prince, I'm a ruler, I'm a chief, I'm in charge. And yet, in God's eyes, the guy that's the lineage from the king is the Jew. You see what I'm saying here? It's pretty fascinating. And it really reminds me of the book of Daniel as well. So verse 6, here we go to verse 6. Speaking of Mordecai, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. So he was one of those taken into captivity around the time of Daniel. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther. So Esther's other name is Hadassah, which means myrtle. And I don't have time to go to, I think it's Zechariah and other places where the Jews are likened to plants. Did you know Jews are likened to fig plant? And Jews are likened to myrtle. It's like you can't kill a myrtle tree. And what's so good about a fig? Well, it's kind of hard to kill a fig too. And if you think about it, the more you trim it, the more fruit comes back. So you can't get rid of the Jew, I guess is the moral of that story. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So he took her into his house, and I guess she would be his cousin, right? They would be cousins. So he was an older cousin who took her in and raised her as his own daughter because his uncle died. Now, she was a fair maiden. So she was fair and she was beautiful. So she was one of the virgins that was taken and put into the beauty contest, if you will. Now, verse 8, so it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together at Shushan, the palace, to the custody of Haggai, that Esther was brought also into the king's house to the custody of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the maiden pleased him. Now, what was so great about her? Well, she was fair, but like I said, true beauty's on the inside. He saw something in her that was like, this is a good, godly, probably godly person. And that's what he saw. She wasn't like some of the other women that were just all about, the fleshly things. Maybe there was something more. Maybe she was spiritual or something. I don't know. But there was something about her that pleased him. And it says in verse 9, and the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house, and he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the women. So she, for some reason, was the one that stood out the most. What do you think it was that stood out the most for her? I think she was the most feminine, in the sense that she was the most womanly. And because she had been brought up in the law of Moses, she probably was wanting to be an obedient wife, like the Bible says. And what do you think that the king was looking for after he just had a Jezebel? So this guy's looking out for the king, and he's trying to find, well, which one will be the actual best one, will actually obey her husband. And this is the one that stood out the most, Mrs. Hadassah, Myrtle, but her name is Star. So in his eyes, he's like, she's the star. I mean, I don't know. But she's the one that stood out the most. Now, so far, though, nobody knows she's a Jew. So far, no one has asked, are you from Israel or are you not from Israel? And that comes out later. So she must have looked like the people in Persia. If you go over to Persia today, it's hard to tell. They look alike. Jews look a lot like the people that live next to them. So she is pretty awesome woman, and he gave her the things for her purification and 7 maidens. This guy goes, I'm going to give you 7 women to wait on you. Could you imagine having 7 people waiting on you? That's like, what would they do? I mean, what did they do for her? Well, what we're about to read, it looks like all they did all day was just rub her with oil and spray perfume on her or something. It's like, Weird. I wouldn't, if I was a woman, I'd be like, go away, leave me alone. But it was all for the king. And this is what the king wanted. So it was all so that she smelled so good that the king couldn't wait to be with her. Now verse 10. Oh, by the way, 7 maidens. That's the number 7 again. In chapter 1, we saw number 7. Again, we're going to see 7, 7, 7. Remember, 7 is the number of perfection, God's number. Now, verse 10, Esther had not showed her people, so she hadn't showed that she was a Jew of her people, nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. All right, so she obeyed him. She obeyed Mordecai. And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the woman's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. So he's checking up on her. He wants to make sure that she's okay. He wants to protect her. Now, when every man's maid's turn was come to go into King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of women, for so were the days of her purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of women. So 6 months she's getting sprayed perfume, and 6 months she's taking oil baths in myrrh. She probably smelled really good. I bet her skin was really soft. What do you guys think? But can you imagine being pampered for a whole year like that? I don't know if I'd like that. She was probably very white and pasty, because it sounds like they're just doing all they can to make this woman look beautiful and smell beautiful. Now, verse 13. Then thus came every maiden unto the king. Whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women into the king's house. So whatsoever she desired, every maiden. So gifts. So they were getting gifts. And there was 6 months of pampering, purification, and preparation for the king to choose the woman that he wanted. Now, verse 14, here's where we get a little weird. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned unto the second house of the woman, to the custody of Shashgaz. What a weird name. Now, do you think maybe he was on, I don't know, RuPaul's Drag Queen or something with a name like Shashgaz or something? I don't know. It just seems like a weird, okay, I'm not going there. But anyway, Shashgaz. I mean, I bet he was kind of a little weird. He probably went around like this a lot. I don't know. I'm just thinking that I'm thinking about a beauty pageant. Who's the people in charge of the beauty pageants? The people that do this a lot. Okay, sorry. All right, so back to here. So old Shashgaz, what a name, man. Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines, she came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. So imagine this king. He's got at least 127 different women, one from each province, I guess. And he's got to call them in and get to know each of them. So this is the first Bachelor, right? You people that watch TV, The Bachelor. I don't even know what that show's about, but can you imagine? This is the first episode of The Bachelor, 2,500 years ago or some stuff. But anyway, so he's calling them in. He's getting to know these women. He's like, I want to choose a woman who's not going to be like Vashti. And so far, he's liking her. So everybody that meets her likes her. What is it about her? It's her demeanor that she's godly and wants to do the right thing. And I think it's because she's not vain like all the other women. She's probably not a blonde. Uh-oh, I just made some enemies there, Anyway, I'll get banned on TikTok if I'm not. But how do you know why blondes wear clothes with what do you call them? Shoulder pads, right? Do you know why? I don't know. Oh. Okay, sorry. Anyway, that's an old joke about blondes. But anyway, it's a pretty bad joke. Anyway, I might edit that out, or maybe not. We'll see. But so she is just lovely in every sense of the word. She's caring, she's loving, she's kind, she's pretty on the outside, smells good too, and probably shaved her underarm. And she's also beautiful on the inside. And everybody's like, she's the star. Isn't that funny? That's her name. She's going to be the one that's chosen, as we see. So, verse 15, is that where we are now? Verse 15. Now, when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai. So it tells us the name of her father. Remember, her father died. Her father's name is Father of Might. That's what it means. Remember Abba, his father? Abihail, not Abigail. That's a woman's name. But Abihail means the father of might. That's wild. His name is the Father of Might, strong. and yet he died. Isn't that wild? That's just, I don't understand that. But Israel at one time was very strong, and yet because they turned against God, they failed. So you continue here, and it says his name was Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go into the king. She required nothing but that Haggai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So inner beauty, not just outer beauty. Esther seems to be an amazing, amazing woman. Now look at verse 16. So Esther was taken unto the king Ahasuerus into his royal house in the 10th month. 10 is the number of Gentiles, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. During the 7th year. That's interesting. Makes me think of a 7-year tribulation. But anyway, so 7 years. 7 is over and over and over again. We keep getting 7. Now, verse 17. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace, and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. So he goes ahead and puts that crown on her. Then he throws a party. Now we know the king is really good at throwing parties, because remember the first chapter, how long was that party? I forget. It was a long time. 180 days, was it? I forget. But that was a long party. So I guess these people love to party. She probably was a little uncomfortable. If she's that virtuous and that great, she's probably uncomfortable with parties. But verse 18, then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. Now it says here, and when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her, for Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him. Verse 21, in those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Now, what does it mean to sit in the king's gate? You remember in other passages we looked at that it seems like that's where the judges sat. And so when people would come to the town, they would look for a guy who was sitting there that was an old man who was usually a judge, and they say, I have this problem with this guy over here. Can you settle it? So it sounds like Mordecai would have been a judge during that time. And so Mordecai was there sitting there, verse 21, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh. I'm telling you, this the more I read this, the more I think of Shakespeare. Here's your Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, if you will. Only Laura got that. But anyway, so the more I think of that, so Bigthan, that's funny. His name is Bigthan. He probably had a big head from what we're about to read. And Teresh, when I hear terror, I think of terror. These were actually terrorists, if you think about it, because of what these guys did. Of those which kept the door were wroth and sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when the inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king. So this guy, Mordecai, finds 2 people that were traitors that were plotting to overthrow the government. They were probably trying to steal the election. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm trying to make it, to where we can understand what they were probably trying to, accuse the king of conspiring with Russia or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing out there so you can understand today what it would be like. But he goes and he tells Esther, and it's like, these guys are trying to kill the king. They want to assassinate him. I mean, they want to go to Butler and shoot him or something. I mean, but so what happened? Well, then they got hung. So you think they would throw a party for Mordecai, right? No, it's just written down. We find out later, and I'm not going there now, I think it's chapter 5 or 6 or somewhere. I think, it's chapter 6, that the king, when he can't sleep, he asks them to read, I guess, the daily journal or whatever, because this was written down. And he reads about Mordecai, and he says, hey, did we give him a party? Because remember, the king loves parties. No, we didn't. So then they give him an award or something. But it's fascinating as you read this, just how God is, remember, we saw last week, God's not mentioned in this book, unless you look at it in the Hebrew language and you look at, But God's unseen hand, God in heaven is watching people do stuff. And he's like, I promised to save this people, so I'm going to do this over here with this guy, do this over here. And God is planning and plotting all this stuff to come together. So that's chapter 2. Now let's quickly read chapter 3. I mean, really, we're just reading today. There's not a lot to get into. But we'll see more of this in Esther chapter 6, verse 1 through 3, when Mordecai is remembered. And they were both hanged on a tree. Isn't that interesting? That's the way they killed people back here, by hanging. And after World War II, they killed people by hanging. That's really, and that, we'll see that. I can't wait to get to that and show you what happened to Hitler's people that went against the Jews. It was like it was prophesied in the Bible. You don't mess with the Jews, amen? Bless you, Joseph, by the way. But anyway, only Joseph understands that. So, verse 3, or chapter 3, verse 1. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. All right, so remember, Mordecai is somehow the son of Kish. And if I'm remembering right, Saul came from Kish. Who did King Saul go out to fight against? The Agagites, remember? Was it King Agag or something like that? So the Agagites, and he didn't kill them. And Samuel comes and he's all upset and says, God's removed you from being king. And then Samuel took his sword and killed this guy. So if you knew this, you would probably harbor some animosity, is the word. Because, you know, I don't know, was it 100 years ago? Was it 500 years ago? I don't know, but your granddaddy killed my granddaddy. I don't like you. That's what's going on here. So this Haman guy, we find out, hates the Jews. And we find out this Mordecai guy doesn't like him because he's one of the enemies of the Jews years ago. So there's a little bit of this going on. All right, it's basically called tribalism. Well, you're not part of my tribe, so I don't like you because your tribe did this to my tribe. We don't really see a lot of that today because we don't think about tribalism much. But let's go here and look at this. After these things, did King Ahasuerus promote Haman? By the way, his name is Haman. You put one letter in there, a G, and it spells hangman. Isn't that weird? And that's what he was trying to do. He's trying to be the hangman. You change one letter on the end, take the N off, and put an S, what do you get? Hamas. And what are they? They're trying to get rid of the Jews, aren't they? Isn't that? It's so weird how names can be so close, and we can see things in that. So he promoted Haman, the son of Ham. Why is it Ham and Ham? Do you think maybe they came from Ham or something? I don't know. Remember Ham in the Bible? I don't know. But anyway, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. So for some reason, this guy Haman got exalted above a lot of people. Now, you know what the name Haman means? I looked up the name Haman. The name Haman means to be noisy or to affirm or to support. Chuck Schumer. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to figure that out, you know. But I'm just saying, if we're trying to apply this to people today, who would we think of? Somebody like that talks all the time. But in Persian, it could mean the god of Amun. Amun. So Haman, his name means noisy. Isn't that weird? Now, Hammedatha, who was Hammedatha? He's his father. The word Hammedatha means he that troubles the law. What a weird name. Your name is the guy that troubles the law. Almost sounds like a troublemaker. So if his father was a troublemaker, then he's going to be a troublemaker. Through flattery, because he's so noisy, it seems like that this guy gets in power. And he comes in, and he is he's an Agagite. Now, I don't have time to read and go back to the Old Testament, all the Agagites. But I do want you to turn to verse 10 real quick. And look what it says here in verse 10. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. So the Agagite are the Jews' enemy. Now, who's writing this? Mordecai. Well, it's actually the Holy Spirit through him. But if you're an Agagite, everyone knows the Agagites hate the Jews. And the Jews hate. Why? Well, there's a number of reasons. They fought against King Agag, remember? And Saul did a horrible job as king and didn't do what he was supposed to. He was told to wipe them all out. If the King Saul had done that, they wouldn't have existed and we wouldn't have this book. That scares me, that you could do something in your life that affects the lives of other people hundreds of years later. That makes me want to do right, because look what Abraham did. his wife goes, oh, well, you don't have any kids. Well, go sleep with with the servant. And then they had a child. And that was out of promise. And that child ended up fighting the child of promise. To this day, they're still fighting in Israel. Thousands of years later. You better do right, because you can hurt somebody even after you're dead. Does that make sense? So that kind of scares me a little bit. But who are the Agagites and where do they come from? Well, they are descendants of the Amalekites. And the Amalekites were from Esau. So Amalek fought against Israel in Exodus 17:8 and other places. So there's a whole lot of history here. We won't get into the history, but there's a lot of history of hating the Jews. And the people that weren't from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the ones that came from Esau and Ishmael, they don't like. And to this day, we still see the terrorists and things like that. All right, so where are we? We just did verse 1. Verse 2. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Uh-oh. Now who does that remind you of in the book of Daniel? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And how they did not bow. So this is all happening around the same time. I always wonder, did Mordecai see them? He's like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Or maybe they saw Mordecai or something, or maybe they're far apart. I don't know, but it's interesting. We're seeing this, and he's just like, I'm not going to bow to that guy. And if he is indeed from Kish, he probably thought, I'm more royal than you are. So, yeah, there's that. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment? And it sounds like he didn't even answer them. Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them. So they keep asking him, why aren't you bowing down to this guy? Everyone else is. He just wouldn't even tell them. And they kept asking him every day till finally he let it slip. Well, because I'm a Jew. Uh-oh. And here's what happens. That they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. So this guy became so angry. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. So this guy, Haman, is not a good fellow. If you ask me, he was a terrorist. If you ask me, he was a Nazi. Why am I saying that? Because he didn't just want to get rid of his political enemy, one man. He wanted to genocide the whole man's race of people. That's pretty evil. And he was probably over there, thinking, I'm going to get rid of all these people. And so then he formed a plan of how. Now, he already had that hatred toward those people because of the wars that they fought before. So it says here in verse 7, in the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur. That is the lot before Haman from day to day, and from the month to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of the kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws, therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them, if it please the king. Okay, now let me back up here. Pure means lot. If you put an im on the end of a word in Hebrew, it's plural. So Purim, lots. So they're casting lots. Now, I told you, I don't understand what this is, casting lots. So I looked everywhere this week to try to figure this out. And this is all I could find that tries to explain it. It says, the Jews of Persia observed along with their neighbors an annual festival that was celebrated in the middle of the last of the winter months. From the beginning, it had the characteristics of a spring masquerade and was the festival of merriment, play, and pranks. A party. This king Ahasuerus, man, all he does is party. And a very popular festival with both Persian and the Babylonian Jewry, and it spread even to Palestine. The historian Josephus called it not the festival of Purim, but the festival of Fordaia, which is contended to be a distortion of the old Persian Farwa Digan. Fatwa. It sounds like fatwa. Anyway, Fordaia, fury. The feast held toward the end of the month of March. The fact is, however, that the feast of Farwadigan lasted at least 5 days and was primarily a commemoration of the dead. Another theory is that Purim, it comes from the Hebrew word pura, which is a wine press, and it has to do, I don't even go there, but it has to do with a lot, casting lots for something. And they determined the fate of men by lot. The gods were believed to determine the fate of men by lot in this Hebrew festival. Did I read that? No, I didn't. I skipped ahead. Theodore Gaster presents several theories for the origin of Purim in his volume, Festivals of the Jewish Year. In one theory, Purim is asserted to date back to the Babylonian New Year festival. On this day, the gods were believed to determine the fate of men by lot. And the Babylonian word for lot was puru, okay, because it's close to Hebrew. It was also postulated the festival was characterized by a ritual pantomime that portrayed the conquest of Babylonian gods of those of its neighbors. So this is the best explanation that I can come to, because I can't figure out what is this casting lots thing. So it had to do with in Babylon. Yeah, do you have something on it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the high priest had stones in their breastplate called the Urim and the Thummim. So, yeah. And casting lots was them reaching in, and whichever stone they pulled out was the answer that they were looking for.
Okay, but that's for the Jews.
Right.
Okay.
Purim is more than likely some sort of pagan holiday that crept into the Jewish.
Right. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. All right, so Ray pointed out that the Jews would have a thing where they would literally cast lots because they had the Urim and Thummim. And so the Jews, they would reach in and they'd pull out a stone, and each stone had a different name of the children of Israel and things like that. But where does this come from? It looks like this whole casting lots in the Bible that Haman's doing and the king is doing is this pagan festival, which you may be right is complete, like, what is the word? Like it's a... What's the word when they take something biblical and they make their own of it? You know what I'm trying to say?
Cultural appropriation?
No, where the devil always, okay, imitation, we'll call it that. It's their imitation of that. So they're casting lots, and like I read here, it had something to do with the festival. Hold on a second. Where their festival was, we're going to cast lots. Now, did they literally sacrifice those people, though? Because we know they were pagans, they would kill people. So maybe there's human sacrifice in that too, but it tied in with their false gods. All right, yeah.
I would just spent 6 months going through Numbers and Deuteronomy last year, and I remember it's mentioned a few times in Numbers and Deuteronomy.
The Urim and Thummim, or the
Lots.
Yeah, casting lots. Yeah, and I said it earlier. There's 7 times in the Bible that they cast lots, and sometimes it was for land, sometimes it was for the priests. Sometimes it was, who did wrong? Well, let's cast lots and find out. And remember, I think it was the guy that stole the Babylonian garment. They found him by that way, and method and things like that. So there's something going on here. This is where the Feast of Purim comes from. And it has to do with this feast of those Persians. And I don't know what they're casting lots for. I couldn't find much on that except for what I just read here. It sounds like they're casting lots to find out who they're going to sacrifice to appease the gods. So it's a bad deal, isn't it? Well, so Haman is like connecting the dots. Hey, I don't want to just sacrifice one guy. Let's sacrifice a whole people. So he is the first Hitler, so to speak. He's wanting to wipe out all the Jews, and that's bad. That's bad. Okay, so did I explain that well enough? I couldn't find a good enough answer of what does it mean, the lots thing. So that's the best thing that I could find. I hope you could find more. Leave it in the comments if you find more on that. So back to chapter 3, and let's get through this real quick. Where did I end here? Verse, do you see it there? Verse 7, in the first month. And like I read over here, they do something in the first month. And then it goes from the first month again to the next month. So there's a whole 12 months, verse 7. All right, so Haman said, verse 8, unto the king Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all of the provinces of the kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. How are they diverse? Because the Jews believe in one God, and all the pagans had many gods. And how do they appease their gods? By sacrifice. And so it says, Neither kept they the king's laws, therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. So he's telling the king, you don't need to let them live. You need to get rid of them. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. Wow. This guy says, King, I want you to genocide this people and let me pay to do it. And you know what he says, how much to pay? He says, and let me pay 10,000 talents of silver. So I looked up, I just typed in, what is 10,000 talents of silver today? And the computer said, and I don't know if this is true, but it said it was $226,291,702.50. Who has that kind of money? Except maybe Bill Gates or some rich guy. Now, is that right? I don't know. I looked up how much is a talent. It's 75 pounds. All right. If we take 1 troy pound, because we know a pound is 16 ounces, but it's troy, it's 12 ounces. So, it's 14.6 ounces. I did the math and it came out to about 36 million. But however you look at it, who's got that kind of money laying around to go kill people? Did he pay? Watch what happens. This is when I read this, I'm like, nuh-uh. The king goes, no, you don't have to pay anything. I'll pay for it. He was so easily convinced to kill the Jews. This guy was going to pay for it out of his own pocket. The king goes, no, we'll just take it out of the treasury. So that makes it sound like a really bad king, doesn't it? Look what it says here in verse 9. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to keep it into the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy. Now, I've said it before. Just remember, Haman is a type of the Antichrist. Okay? And the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, and the people also, to do with them as it seemeth thee good. He said, I will pay, verse 9. King goes, no, here, I'll give you the money. You just go do it. Wow. Did the king even know who the Jews were? And he just said, oh, well, they're bad, let's get rid of them? Or he's got a lot of faith in this guy Haman, doesn't he? And to give him the money to go do it. It's just like they were just giving money away. Man, if they only had somebody that would have audited the books or something, because it seems like they always take your taxpayer dollars and give them to the worst people, don't they? Man, if only there was some guy there that would have had a doge or something. But, oh, by the way, do you know what doge is? Do you know what a doge is? In Venetia, over in Italy, the people that were in charge were called doges. Did you know that? So whenever I see Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, that was a title of a guy that was almost a king back in the Middle Ages. That's a weird title. I've never heard anybody talk about that online, but that's kind of an interesting topic. All right, so the king said, verse 11 to Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. So he told him, I'll pay all this money to do it. And the king goes, no, here, take all this silver. That's a lot of silver. That is 1,095,000 ounces of silver. Who wouldn't want that? Yeah, I'll take it. That's a lot of money. So, and the king said unto Haman, the silver is given to thee, the people also, to do with them as it seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month. I wonder if it was a Friday. Friday the 13th, I don't know. But that's a bad number, 13. And there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants. And by the way, what did we read? We read the king gave him the ring. So the king's like, yeah, do whatever you want, just walks away. Well, you write it, and when you seal it, the kings had a little seal here, and they'd use wax, and they'd seal it. It was the king. It wasn't an auto pen, if you will. But in a way, it was kind of like this was an auto pen. It's almost like the king didn't know what was going on, and somebody did something in his name. But we don't know anything about that. So anyway, no, we don't know anything about that. So on the 13th day of the first month, there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people and of every province, according to the writing thereof, and every people after their language, in the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day. Even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So they're to destroy, kill, cause to perish. I mean, that's the same thing. And they are to take as a spoil. So you go kill them and take what belonged to them. Have we ever seen that happen in history? It's exactly what the Schützenstaffel, the Nazis, did when they rounded up the Jews and put them in the Gestapo round. That was called the Gestapo. Do you know Russia did that to the Jews too? Have you ever seen Fiddler on the Roof? Do you know that when the Russians, the communists, would go and do that to the Jews, it was called a pogrom, P-O-G-R-A-M. All throughout history, people have hated the Jews. And the reason is they say, well, the Jews are always rich. Well, they're not always rich. Sometimes they're poor. Okay, bad joke, bad joke. But there's always been this hatred toward Jews all throughout the Bible and all throughout history. Why do you think that is? Oh, I don't know. There's a certain guy named Satan that hates God. And God said to Abraham, hey, your seed I'm going to do. And so Satan's been fighting against that seed ever since. So we love the Jews. We don't hate the Jews. We pray for them. We know the promise. Blessed are them that bless them. Cursed are them that curse them. Okay? But it's fascinating that this escalated quickly, didn't it, in this chapter? I mean, all of a sudden, here's a queen, and she's yay and everything. And then all of a sudden, now her whole race is going to be wiped. Well, that means she's going to be killed too, because she's a Jew. So here's what happens. We're going to go ahead and finish this up. And it says, in one day, they were supposed to kill everybody. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. That's allowing everybody to go out and kill them. It's almost like a purge. You know, Hollywood makes these movies, The Purge, where they, let's let everybody go kill everybody and stuff like that. That's against the law. So they literally wrote a law to go kill people, which is against the law. So there's good laws and there's bad laws. This is a pretty bad law. But remember, this is a law, the law of the Medes and Persians, which changeth not or altereth not. Remember that? And I think it was in the book of Daniel. So when they made a law, you couldn't change that law. Wow. All right, so the post went out being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. I bet. Wouldn't you be perplexed? What if they passed a law today that everybody in America can go kill, I don't know, people from some country? I wouldn't do it, because thou shalt not kill. I wouldn't go kill people. But they say, but you can take their stuff if you do it. You know how many people would want to do that? But it's just wrong. Even if they say it's okay, it's wrong. Now, should we stop there? I just can't stop there. All we're going to do is read chapter 4 and just see what happened, all right? So, when Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. I bet. And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. So he can't go into the king's palace, but he can sit outside. So he's sitting on the steps of the White House, if you will, with his protest. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. What does his name mean again? Mordecai means bitter oppression. How often have the Jews been oppressed throughout history? How often have they sat in sackcloth and ashes? Because something always seemed to fall on them bad. So he received it not. Then called Esther for Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. We started, I think it was last chapter, with Mordecai telling Esther what to do. Now Esther's telling Mordecai what to do. Why? Is it right for a woman to go tell a man what to do? Well, no, she's the queen though. So he had to obey the queen. So Hatak, which is weird, that sounds like attack, doesn't it? Almost sounds like his name is Attack. So Hatak went forth to Mordecai into the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it to her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hathach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. Why don't they just get together and talk? Well, he's in sackcloth and ashes, so he can't go inside. Because there's some law that says you can't go inside unless you got a suit on. But then they got this one guy elected that wears a hoodie all the time, so they changed the law. Dude, I'm getting too much into a modern what we see. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They literally changed the law of attire in the Congress because this guy liked to wear his hoodie. Okay, anyway, wow. How do we get over there? So, verse 10, again, Esther spake unto Hathach and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come into the king, into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. Now this is essential. This is key. This is just, it's so much like a Shakespeare play. They should be teaching this in colleges because this is incredible. This ties in later. So you have this scepter, and I don't know what it looked like, but this long, you know what a scepter is, a long stick. There was probably a big jewel on the end there, and it probably had all these, pretty things on it. And it's all made out of gold, and the king has that. And he passed a law that if you come to me, if I don't go like this and point it to you, then they're going to grab you and take you out and kill you because you're not welcome. So can you imagine being that powerful that you had a stick, and that stick was whether you live or you die? And you come in before him, excuse me. He goes, they're like, and you're like, oh, they're going to kill me. But if he goes, yes, what would you like? So you're taking your life into your own hands to go see this king. He's that powerful. He has the power of life and death, and he just took his ring off and gave it to this guy, and this guy's about to commit genocide. So that scepter, though, we're going to find out later. This woman, Esther, says, I'm taking my life in my own hands. We'll see what happens. And she goes in, and thankfully he goes like this to her. What if it was Vashti? He probably would have went, and they would have killed her, right? So because her whole life she lived right, that gave the opportunity for her to save her people. But you just remember that golden scepter. That's just amazing, okay? So we're almost done here. There is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he might live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. So he's like, oh, by the way, Esther, you're a Jew. Like, wink, wink. What makes you think you're not going to die if he's going to kill all the Jews? And she probably went, oh, yeah. I don't know. She probably thought, oh. So here's what happens. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed, and who knoweth whither thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Wow, he's literally saying, it could be that you are where you are to save our people. That's a lot to lay on somebody. Hey, they're about to genocide a whole people, and you just might be the only person to stop it. Wow. There's two people fighting, and you're trying to start a ceasefire, and you're trying to get involved, and one of them comes over and yells at you, and you tell them, get out of here, what are you, a moron? And you're trying to talk these two people from killing each other, No, we don't know anything about that, right? You know what I'm talking about. But anyway, it's, wow. So, where did I end here? Verse 15, then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. Wow. Jesus was 3 days and 3 nights. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. What a thing. What else could she do? Get killed then, or maybe get killed now. But if I get killed then, I can't save anybody. Right now, I put my life at risk. I might can save everybody. So that's an amazing thing. If I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Now she's commanding him. She's raised by him, obeying him. Now he's obeying her. But that's because she is the queen. She is the queen. So next time, I won't be here next week, but the week after, we'll start on chapter 5. And we see what Esther does, and it's hilarious. Because what's the king like? Party! So what does Esther do? Hey, let's throw a party. That's what we're at there. I'm sorry, it's so carnal. Those carnal pagans just, all they think about is the flesh, So she throws a party, and she tries, it's a banquet, it says, okay? But she tries to figure it out. And the Haman fella, dude, I think Shakespeare should have written this, because it's so just like reading Hamlet or something like that. This is just like Hamlet, where he does the play and the king sees the play. Well, she's holding this banquet and she's talking to Haman and stuff. This is amazing. This is amazing. So we'll stop there. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Did you find out what Haman meant?
What does Haman mean? If I had it in my notes, I read over it, but I thought I said what Haman meant. Yeah, didn't I have it up here? No, okay, let's look up. Yeah, I said it earlier. It means noisy. Yeah, I had it here in my notes. Haman means noisy, and I don't know where it is. Oh, it means to be noisy, to affirm, or to support. It can also mean the god of Amun. So his God is not our God. And so we know the Antichrist, and that's what he's a type of, is going to be noisy, and he's going to tell people to affirm an oath to him and take a mark and things like that. So Haman is a great type of the Antichrist. Yes, anybody else?
Somebody said about the laws. They said that they think it's like voting. Do you think it's like voting when they pass laws?
Voting is you get to give your voice. A lot is more like chance. A lot is we just reach in and see what you get. Yeah. So it's a little different.
Chance, if you think.
But then again, I know. But in the Bible, when they did it, it always seemed to pick the right one. So we look at it as chance, but somehow God must be able to move them around in the bag or something. I don't know how that works. I don't know, but it just shows me God's more powerful.
It seems like it always worked in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
You got to Acts.
And then Acts, they just chose a guy, and you never hear his name again.
They probably thought, it worked.
They jumped the gun.
Yeah.
Well, that's another good thing to show dispensations. Things changed, didn't they? A little bit. So, anybody else? Any more questions?
Whenever we're done, there's a guy asking why did Jesus send the Antichrist, but I think he's been told.
Well, you can't have love without free will. So God gave man free will, and unfortunately they chose wrong. And still to this day, you can choose good or evil. But if you choose good, then you can show love to God by obeying him. And so why did God send the Antichrist? Well, I don't think God sent him, but I think God lets him be, and we know how it all works out, because the whole reason for the Antichrist, Zephaniah 3:8. I believe look that up, Zephaniah 3:8. So that God can get all his enemies in one place when he comes back at the Battle of Armageddon, and it's less effort trying to go find them all. They're all right there, and boom, he wipes them out. So that's why God lets the Antichrist, and like we looked at last week, give them enough rope to hang themselves. God lets that Haman do what he wants, and then Haman ends up hanging on the gallows that he built. So God never overexerts himself. He always has a plan. Zephaniah 3:8.
Therefore wait ye upon me, saith the Lord, until the day that I rise up to the prey. For my determination is to gather the nations, that I may assemble the kingdoms, to pour upon them my indignation, even all my fierce anger, for all the earth shall be devoured with the fire of my jealousy.
So Revelation, Jesus comes back, and out of his mouth the fire, and all the United Nations at that time are under the Antichrist, and they're all there in the valley of Jezreel, or Armageddon, the valley of Megiddo, And that's where God destroys the Antichrist. And it says the nations. So there must be a place called the UN that the Antichrist is going to come out of, right? So, you know, you could look at it like this. Haman was an Arab. And do you know the majority of the United Nations is Arab nations? So I can see them getting majority and them taking over. And that's why the Jews are persecuted, because the majority of those in control are just like Haman. Probably Amalekites, probably from that line. Isn't that wild? So history repeats itself. Anybody else? Any more questions or anything? You like this book so far? I like it. I can't wait to get more into it because there's so much more. But I like the fact that it's just, there's so much that we can see that we can see in our day to day. I mean, we can totally look back there. We can see, wow, this guy named Ahasuerus, he's like some guy named Biden, you know, or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, and hey, somebody's using the auto ring instead of the auto pen to sign stuff in his name and things like that. So it's just fascinating. But what do you think that king was like, man? He was probably a puppet. He's just like, oh, go do whatever you want. Let's party. You know, it just seems like he likes parties all the time. And I bet Vashti was probably a wine bibber, like Kamala. But anyway, so isn't that funny? All right. Anybody else? I hate to stop. This was fun. Any more questions or comments?
Ruth and Esther back to back. What a time to be alive.
I know. And Ruth was a type of us getting raptured out. And then Esther would be a type of, once we're gone, then God goes back to dealing with the Jews. And that's what we'll see in the rest of the book. That's the Antichrist, Haman. And the Jews are delivered. And what happens in the tribulation? All Israel shall be saved. Romans 11. And Jesus is going to have the true scepter, right? Scepter of Judah, not the scepter of...
They'll use to separate the goats and the sheep too, right?
Yeah.
Sepulcher, so that's cool.
Isn't that something?
Even he has a sepulcher.
And dude, I wish I could go back in time and see all this, but dude, can you imagine if we had a time machine, we went back, we'd probably be dead. Because we don't know all their rules and everything. We just walk in, oh, look, the king. And he's just like, and they come over and they kill you because he doesn't do that for you. So it's a good thing we can't time travel or we'd probably be dead. Yeah, it's like, it's hot in here. Anyway, you know. So anybody else?